Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Big Sky Now podcast. I'm your host, Josh Amick, with my panel, John, Fritz, Mark, and Ian. Exciting weekend of football coming up. A lot of games going on, unlike last weekend, so we'll see what the games are that we're most looking forward to. Starting off with two teams that are coming off a bye week last week, Weber State and NAU, as they play in Flagstaff this weekend. Who goes to 3-2 in the Big Sky after this weekend between these two teams, Fritz?
I'm going to go with the Northern Arizona Lumberjacks. We talked about Weber a lot throughout the season about how they managed to come up short. It seems like they got their signature win up in Missoula a few weeks ago, and then they fell back to their kind of puzzling ways of not finishing drives and having bad turnovers. So Ty Pennington just had a whale of a game 2 weeks ago. Then they had a week off. If he's healthy, I'm gonna pick NAU to prevail at the Findlay Toyota Field, otherwise known as the Walk Up Skydome.
Yeah, John mentioned in our last episode that this was a big conference game, and it really is for kind of separation in those teams in the middle of the pack of the standings. Just kind of looking through both of these teams' schedules, especially more on Weber State side. They played in a couple of shootouts so far in the last couple of weeks. I know they're coming off of their bye, but I think this game does kind of have that possibility of turning into a high-scoring, closely contested game. And in a game like that, I'm going to lean with Northern Arizona just because I think their pass defense is a little bit better. And I think they can come out in a big spot, maybe force a turnover or something along those lines. So I'm also kind of sticking with Northern Arizona for this one.
Yeah, kind of depends on which version of which team shows up. It seems, you look at Weber and it's going to be the team that went to Missoula and beat the mighty Grizz, or the Weber team that lost the last 2 weeks. NAU is going to be the team with two close losses to Idaho and Montana, or the one that barely had to escape at home against Idaho State. So it kind of depends who shows up. I would probably, like you guys, I would side with NAU probably just because they're playing at home.
Yeah, Ian kind of mentioned it too, and like I mentioned the last one, I feel like this is potentially the biggest game of the week in the Big Sky. I mean, two teams kind of looking for that separation in the conference standings. Maybe not in the playoff aspect of it, but definitely for the conference standings. But both teams, we've seen them have their flaws this year, and we've seen them get hot. It really depends on how. I think personally, this game's going to come down to how either team starts those first couple drives after the bye week, being able to kind of establish a set game plan, kind of script out the plays for those first couple drives. If one defense steps up and gets a quarterback out of rhythm, I think it could potentially turn into a runaway early in that sense. But, if both quarterbacks come out and play well, I think we're suited up for a really, really tight game, a good battle. And it's another one of those games where NAU has a chance to take advantage of that home field, that altitude, run teams out of breath. And I don't really want to pick yet on who's going to win. I'm still kind of thinking that one out in my head, but I think that this is going to be a really good battle.
Yeah, this game does have a lot of implications on it, especially with NAU looking at their schedule, like John mentioned last episode. If NAU can find a way to pull out this win, they have a really good shot of winning out, and that would get them to 8 wins, 6-2 in the Big Sky if they were to win out. So that would be a really impressive resume for them, for the playoff committee to consider. Another team coming off the bye is the Bobcats, who are 8-0. They're heading to Eastern, where things can get a little weird on that red turf out in Cheney. Is this game destined to be a shootout, or off the bye week, do we think Montana State will kind of stifle the Eagles and this game won't be much of a contest? What do you think, Ian?
All right. Eastern does kind of have a tendency to keep some of these games a little bit close. You look at last week against Idaho. I mean, it was a 10-point loss, but it's pretty back and forth throughout most of it. If you're just kind of looking at how it played out, obviously the game against Montana about a month ago. However, even though it's at home in Cheney, I just think Montana State is just too tough for Eastern to keep up with throughout the game. I think they'll hang around till maybe around halftime, and then that's kind of where you'll see that separation start. But I think Montana State's going to be able to walk onto that red turf and leave with a win.
Yeah, I mean, Eastern's going to be able to move the ball on them a little bit, or maybe a lot. I mean, they move it on everybody. So Montana State better pay attention. I mean, just look what Eastern did to the Grizz on the beautiful red turf. So the other thing with Montana State coming off a bye, are they refreshed or are they a little bit rusty? So we'll kind of see if it takes them a while to get going. Eastern, they're 2-6. They still got a lot of pride. I mean, last week was a big game for them. I mean, they're kind of tired of hearing about Idaho over here. I mean, the Eastern was the talk of this area for a decade, and now Jason X shows up, and Idaho's kind of the thing now, and they're the sexy thing, and now Eastern's 2-6, and they got to hear about how good Idaho is when they used to be able to hear about how good Eastern is. So they're still going to play with a lot of pride against Montana State, and I think it'll be closer than most people think.
Yeah, these the last couple games that have been played at Eastern Washington between these two teams have come down to a field goal. So I'm maybe not expecting a field goal game. I think Montana State's gonna get a comfortable win. I don't think that they're gonna shut them down entirely. They're not gonna, it's not gonna be a shutout and a runaway in that regard. I liked what Ian said. I think Eastern might be able to hang in for about a half there, and they pulled out some trick plays. They pulled out the onside kicks at some interesting times. So maybe they get one of those to go their way. They're in it in the fourth quarter. They might have a chance. But I'd personally think that the Cats will probably, pull away in the second half. I'd say probably a 42-21 game.
Yeah, I kind of expect a 20-point game too, but I'm interested to see how things develop. Eastern had a 107-yard kickoff return last week. MSU, up until this season, seemed to be not real good on special teams. Kind of seemed to have solved that issue this season. We'll see how that looks on Saturday. The Bobcats tend to make people one-dimensional. That's good for them. But if you make Eastern throw it all the time, this guy named Efton Chisholm has, I think, the second most yards in FCS, the most catches, and only a couple of people have more touchdowns than his 8. So, I expect, along with John said, a 48-28 type game.
All right. So going off of what John and Ian said, I need to hit the books and hammer Eastern to cover the first half. We'll see how that goes on Saturday. But moving on to another game, Portland State travels south to face Sacramento State. Portland State coming off the bye. Do you think they're going to go into Sacramento State prepared to hand Sac State another loss? Or do you think this is a good chance for Sacramento State to figure out some of those turnover issues, get right on offense, and play a clean game? What do you think, Mark?
I think it depends on how motivated Sac State is at whatever they are, 3-5 and coming off a loss in Pocatello that might have, put the nail in the coffin as far as their playoff hopes. So they're the better team. They kind of have to win out to have a chance, and even that might not be good enough. Portland State has, exciting quarterback in Sasha Ray, but they're kind of schizophrenic and in general as a team, so that they kind of have ability, but they kind of don't always show it all the time. So I think if Sac State cares, it's a chance to kind of get healthy this week.
Like Mark said, Portland State and Chachere there, he's had games where he's come out and showed out. He's won a Big Sky Offensive Player of the Week award at one point this year. Sac State, I have a question on how healthy they are. They lost Elijah Tautoliver in that first half against Idaho State. He didn't return, finished with 100 yards on 11 carries in a quarter and a half of play. They also lost their defensive lineman leader, Brandon Knott, in the first half of that game. He also didn't return. So if either of those guys are coming back this week or how long they're out for will be a big thing for them as well. But yeah, it comes down to pride at this point for the Hornets. They need to represent the name on the front of the jersey, and if they want to go out and win, they need to come together as a team.
Yeah, I don't think any of us like the Hornets schedule after this game, so it should be one. I'm having a hard time picking it. It seems like maybe Portland State could spring another upset on the road, which they've already done once. Saucher is an amazing player at times, and I think Sacramento State did have another guy rush for 100 last week. Um, gosh, they're at home. They want to join the Pac-12. They better start winning these games.
Yeah, when I was looking into this game, I focused a little more on the turnovers, and I found something that kind of jumped up to me. Uh, Last week, or I don't know if it was last week or a couple weeks ago, I mentioned how Sac State is fourth in the FCS with terms of turnovers. They're still fourth in the FCS with 19, but Portland State has the second fewest turnovers force this year with only four. So it's just kind of what's going to give in that game. I don't know what's going to give, but I am going to ride with Sac State. I think they just really need a win. And if they're at home, I'm going to go with them.
So Ian, you're saying it's the old stoppable object versus movable force.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Some other games this weekend that could get ugly, not saying they will, but they have a possibility to, is 7-1 UC Davis coming off a bye week hosting Northern Colorado, and 6-2 Montana on the road at 2-5 Cal Poly. With the Grizz and Aggies facing each other the following week, is there a chance either of these teams kind of look ahead and don't take their opponents too seriously and maybe slip up and have a bad game, John?
I definitely feel like it's easy for both of them to have that slip up. Personally, I don't think that either will, because UC Davis has already kind of had that game this year against Portland State. They pulled out the 1 point win late on in a game that very easily should have been won. So I feel like they've already gone through that scare. They're not going to really overlook anybody else. At least I'd hope so if I'm a coach on that team. For Montana, Cal Poly has always kind of been a thorn in the side for the Grizzlies over the years. So maybe not so much in the recent years, but I know Coach Hauk will not overlook a team like that has, played them tough, won games in Missoula, especially now that you're going down to Spanos Field. So yeah, it might not be the Cal Poly of old, but Montana definitely has to keep their eyes open.
Yeah, if I had to pick one team that might look ahead, I'd pick UC Davis. I think Montana's coming off a game that was kind of an MEH game against Northern Colorado, 24-0. Win's a win, and they haven't let the Bears score in 3 years or three meetings over 4 years. And the last two times they played the Mustangs, it got pretty ugly. It was 39-7 down there in 2021, and then 57-0 2 years ago in Missoula. Last year they didn't play. This year they go down there, and I don't know. Cal Poly is just a ways away from being middle of the pack in the Big Sky, and Montana remains a top three team in the league. So if I had to pick a team that might look ahead, I guess I'd go with the Davis Aggies.
Yeah, all I have in my notes is no. I just think in terms of overlooking, I just think both of these coaches are going to have their staffs ready for not just this game or not just that game when they meet in 2 weeks, but this first game coming up. These are both two really good coaches, and I think they're going to know how important every single game is, and that you can't really overlook anybody. And I also thought, like John mentioned, UC Davis kind of had the look ahead spot already, and they got away with a win up at Portland State. So no, I think they're both going to be ready. I think they'll both handle business on Saturday.
I was looking at my notes and I have more than no on there. So what I had was maybe Montana being on the road at Cal Poly. I know, you can say Bobby Houck will have them ready to go, but kids are kids, they look at these things too and kind of figure out how the games are supposed to go. You look at UC Davis. I mean, they've been pretty impressive all year. They're coming off a bye. They might not be so sharp, but they are at home still. Like you guys mentioned, there was the game at Portland State. So, I would probably say Montana probably has the bigger chance of maybe overlooking who they're playing, but I don't see either of the teams losing.
All right. Yeah, I'm hoping that both of the teams prevail just for the simple fact that it'll make the following week's matchup that much more of a big game, and should be quite possibly the game of the year in the Big Sky so far, in my opinion. Heading on to my favorite portion of the podcast is when we make our picks. And the king has returned. Fritz is back up top, sole possession of the leaderboard after sweeping the board last week. Now holds a 58-14 record on the season. Ian is behind him a game. Mark is behind him a game. And I have got myself out of the bottom of the barrel for the first time in 9 weeks. So I'm proud of myself. But we're all just a couple games back from Fritz. So Fritz is going to kick us off this week with his picks like he's done most of the year. So Fritz, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'll pick the Bobcats over Eastern, Davis over Northern Colorado. I'll pick NAU over Weber. So that gives me 3 home winners. And then I'm going to pick a couple road winners, Montana winning over Cal Poly. And then my upset special, I'm going to pick Portland State over Sac State. So there's an opening for you guys to catch up.
Ian, it's on you.
Alrighty. I've got Montana State over Eastern, UC Davis over Northern Colorado. I was going to go with whichever the opposite Fritz picked in the NAU Weber State game, but since he did the upset in the other game, I'm going to stick with NAU. I've got Montana over Cal Poly and Sac State over Portland State.
Yeah, I'm going to take Montana State in a closer than people might think game at Eastern Washington. UC Davis to beat Northern Colorado, NAU to beat Weber State, Montana to win at Cal Poly, and since Fritz gave us the opening, I'm going to take Sac State to beat Portland State. So I'll be tied or it'll be up by 2. So I guess we'll see what happens in that swing game.
All right. I'll go now. I also am going to pick Montana State to beat Eastern. I'm taking UC Davis over Northern Colorado. I was going to take whatever opening there was, and I think I'm going to go with this one. I had NAU circled. I think at home they should win, but I'm going to go with Weber State just because the first 3 guys all went with NAU, so I'm going to take my opportunity to make up a game right here. I'm going to go with Montana over Cal Poly, and then I'm also going to take Sac State to beat Portland State. But I do think that game is going to be closer than some people expect. So maybe Fritz is on to something. All right, John, it's on you.
Yeah, I noticed you didn't mention me, so that must mean that I'm bottom of the barrel now. But
you're by 1 game. By 1 game. We're all in this. We're all in this close.
It's tight.
I've been there
I'm
all
not
year.
behind.
It's not a bad place.
Yeah, I'm not behind by 10 games. I'll take it.
Yeah.
I've got Montana State winning, of course. I feel like that's kind of the easy one for all of us to take. Davis, I think will cruise in their game. I'm going to pick Weber on the road at NAU also. I've got Montana over Cal Poly, and I'm going to go with Sac State at home.
All right, so John is leaving the door open for me to return to the bottom barrel. So we'll see. Actually, no, we have the same picks. So you're not going to make up any ground on me, John. So we'll see what happens.
I just want to catch up to Fritz.
We're all trying to catch Fritz. Ian was tied up last week and then had the slip up. And Ian, do you remember what that slip up was with the pick you made?
Pretty sure it was Sac State, and I just picked him again this week.
Yep.
So
yeah,
and I think that they're most of my losses this year.
I was very happy because me and John were both at the office, and I was like, I knew Sac State was going to win this game because it was looking that way. And then Idaho State pulled it off. And then I looked back at the sheet from last week, and I was like, I picked Idaho State. That game I was going back and forth, but I ended up getting it right. So I
saw the DB drop the interception, and I was like, okay, my pick still has a chance, but alas, it did not have a chance.
I was rooting for Sac State the whole time until I looked at the sheet and realized I was rooting for the wrong team. So we'll see what happens. But thank you guys for another great episode of the Big Sky Now podcast. Join us next week. We have some very big games next week, and we'll break down the matchups from this weekend on Tuesdays always, and then Thursday we'll have that great slate of games to break down for you and hopefully give you some other winners to pick. But I want to thank my panel as always, and thank you everyone else for joining us. We'll see you all next week on the Big Sky Now podcast. And until then, take care.